So we've got 2 all-wheel drive hot hatches and 1 front-wheel drive one. Now we all know what we think's going to happen, but how will things actually play out?
Sorry guys, but before we answer that particular question, we need to first look at the protagonists.
The new Ford Focus RS, it's got a 2.3 litre turbocharged engine with 350 horsepower, 470 newton meters of torque on overboost. It's got all-wheel drive and starts from around £31,000. Now the Golf R, that also starts from around £31,000. It's also got all-wheel drive like the Focus, but it's got a 2 litre turbocharged engine with 300 horsepower and 380 newton meters of torque. Then we come to the Honda Civic Type R. So it starts from £30,000. It's got a 2 litre turbocharged engine with 310 horsepower and 400 newton meters of torque, but it's only front wheel drive.
Each of these cars are designed to be thrashed on a back road and hooned on a track. But before you can even get to those locations, you're going to have to drive on some boring roads. And you won't be having much fun in the Ford, as its firm suspension will bruise your RS, and the shark clutch will cause you to kangaroo at low speeds. How very embarrassing.
What's also embarrassing is the turning circle. So let's just say, oh no, I'm going the wrong way. I need to do a U-turn. Well, bear with me people, this could take some time. Because the turning circle is, well, it's dreadful. I think that's the best way to describe it. We'll get there in the end. Okay, so this is not the most exciting way to start a hot hatch group test review. Sorry mate, sorry, yes, Ford Focus RS, crap turning circle.
The Civic is a little bit more manoeuvrable in town, but the suspension is still just as jiggly.
One thing I will say though is that this Civic has such lovely weights to its controls, the steering, the gear shift, which is, oh, it's about the best in the business, and the brake and clutch pedal, that actually you can derive some pleasure of it when you're just going very slowly by just changing gear and enjoying the feel and the interaction with the car through its lovely controls.
But if you're on the hot hatch that's by far and away the easiest to live with, it's the Golf R.
Now as you pootle about, it's all too easy to forget that you're actually in a performance car because it's just that comfortable. This particular car is fitted with the optional £800 adaptive dampers, and well, they're well worth it because in comfort mode, it really does mean comfort. It just glides over bumps.
However, head away from the town and everything changes. Here, it's the Ford Focus RS which shines.
On a road like this car just, it makes so much sense, it comes alive, it's just loads of fun.
Its secret is a torque vectoring all-wheel drive system that can send 70% of the power to the back and up to 100% of that power to either rear wheel for maximum traction.
And that gives you the sense of it pushing around the corner and makes this car feel genuinely rear drive biased, and well, I love it for that.
The Golf's all-wheel drive system isn't quite as clever. As a result, it still feels a bit front-wheel drivey. And then there's the trade-off for the more forgiving suspension.
The faster you go, it starts to get a little bit more unsettled, whereas the Ford actually gets more settled the quicker you go. And you just seem that little bit more keyed into the tarmac at higher speeds in the Ford Focus RS than you do with this. Still, this is a very, very capable car, and it's amazing how it has this split personality.
You may think that in comparison, the front-wheel drive Civic Type R may struggle to put its power down, but not so.
It's actually much better than you'd think, so it never feels quite as composed at high speed on a bumpy British B road as the Ford Focus does, but there's still loads of grip. And while you can't get on the power quite as soon coming out of a tight corner, there's still loads of traction from that diff because it can send power to the outer front wheel to help drag you around.
Make no mistake, this is a fun car, and its looks leave you in no doubt about its performance, though the design may be a bit too extreme for some. Inside, it's the most flamboyant of the three, yet it's got decent rear seats and the biggest boot here. It's just a shame about the confusing infotainment system. The Golf R is so much better to use, and it feels the most expensive car inside, if a tad bland. It's the same with the outside. This is a performance car which can slip under the radar, and the boxy shape means it's got the best rear passenger space and a sensible boot.
The RS is perhaps the least practical of the three cars here, and for instance, its boot. It's kind of small for a car in this class, so yeah, I wouldn't be interested in a Ford Focus RS at all. Obviously not, that's complete nonsense, but you know, one thing that might put me off and other people is the styling because, well, it's a little bit boy racery, but it doesn't go the whole hog and look like a race car for the road in the same way that the old Mark II Ford Focus RS did.
This car is also the least appealing of the three inside. It feels a bit cheap and nasty in places. Those horrible stuck-on gauges really don't help. But you can kind of forgive the Ford of this because it has so much personality.
So here we are in the Focus RS on the track, so we may as well press the drive mode to put it into track mode. And that stiffens up the suspension, also alters the throttle response a little bit more and the weight of the steering and stuff like that. Also releases some of the reins of the electronic stability control program. But we can go one better, we can put it into drift mode, and that lets you do some silly things in this car. So give it a bung. Oh yeah, baby! Oh, this car is a lot of fun. I'm going to give it back with hardly any tires on at all. Sorry, Ford.
Drift mode is great for beginners, but feels a little bit artificial. With all the driver's aids off, the RS is even more fun.
Now the Golf doesn't have any of that drift mode shenanigans, but what you can do is turn the ESP all the way off. It's the only car the VW does that lets you do that, but even if you're to give this car a bit of a bung, you can get it sideways a bit, but not quite in the same way that you can in that Ford Focus RS, because the way the drive goes to the rear just isn't quite the same. But what this car does is really surprise you in its capability. It's got a real split personality. So you can absolutely hoon it around if you want to. It's very, very quick and capable with loads of grip, but it never feels quite as playful as that Ford Focus RS.
You see, while the Golf R is a well-rounded thing, a track does start to expose its weaknesses. With the Civic Type R though, it's the complete opposite.
So now on the track, I can finally utilise the R mode. Now you wouldn't use it on the road because it firms up the suspension to a point that it just shakes your fillings loose. Now obviously the big difference with this car is that it's front wheel drive, which does totally affect the way it feels to drive. It also means that it's lighter than the other two, so it's 100 kilos lighter than the Golf R and 170 lighter than the Ford Focus RS, and that means that it just feels more agile, more precise, responds to your inputs quicker, and you can brake later, plus it doesn't work its tyres so hard. It really, really does just feel like a race car. You know, it's just so sharp and precise. It doesn't move about in the same way that the Ford Focus does, so backing off the throttle or doesn't get it tucked in so much. But you probably noticed there, my God, it may only drive two wheels, but it drives them really well. And I reckon, you know, on a good day, good conditions, I'm going to be able to put in faster lap times in this Civic than the other two cars. If it's raining, completely different story. But good conditions, this is the one to take on a track day.
Its 2-litre turbo engine is the most suited to track use too, as it really encourages you to rev it out and chase that red line. It's just a shame that the engine note is a bit dull compared to the old naturally aspirated Type Rs. Now who'd have thought that a Golf would sound better? But the 2-litre turbo in the R, it just does. And while its engine has less turbo lag than the Civic, it still rewards a good spanking.
Now the Focus RS's engine sounds the best. In all but normal mode, it does this. It's a little bit silly, but it's a lot of fun.
It not only sounds great, but it feels the most instant. Shame it doesn't really encourage you to rev it quite so much as the other two.
And that brings us back to the beginning and the drag race. Without further ado, I get a good start, so does the Golf. Civic being front wheel drive left behind a touch, but I have left the others for dead. Now though, the Civic looks like it's coming back against the Golf. Actually, oh, there we go. Yes. Well, I think that was pretty conclusive. Ford Focus RS wins. Interesting thing though, that Civic, not as fast off the line as the Golf, obviously, front wheel drive, but then it pulled it back against the Golf and I think it beat it across the line.
So, where does that leave us?
Well, the Golf R, so it's the complete package, you know, it's dead easy to drive and to live with, then you put your foot down and it turns into a sports car. It completely rearranges your mind what this car can actually do. I think this is the one that's going to suit most people most of the time. But for those people who are into track days, this is the car to have. The Honda Civic Type R. It doesn't feel in any way lacking by just being front wheel drive. It just feels the most precise, and this is the one that you're going to get the most enjoyment from. If you want to improve your lap times and be nice and neat and tidy on a racetrack, get still good fun on the road because it's got such lovely controls. But the one for me, the one that gives me the biggest smile is this, the Ford Focus RS. I mean, it's utterly bonkers. It's got a really strong engine, but it's that clever all-wheel drive system which makes it feel actually rear drive biased, and it's an absolute hooligan, but it won't punch you in the face. The Ford Focus RS, it's a brilliant car.
If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it and subscribe to our channel. And if you click on the video windows, you can watch the individual video reviews of the Honda Civic Type R, the Golf R and the Ford Focus RS.